The noose was grown, not tied. It pulsed faintly with bioluminescent veins, a living loop of alien muscle that coiled and uncoiled like it was breathing. Suspended from an arch of bone glass and prayer stone, it hovered above a circular pit carved into the flesh of the planet itself. Below, the pit didn't hum with machines or circuitry. It pulsed low, steady, organic, like a sleeping god's heartbeat. The execution site was a cathedral of silence. Above it all, 9 alien forms hovered on spires sculpted from raw language. Glyphs shifted across the stone, fractal, recursive, readable only by those born into authority. Their bodies shimmered with ceremonial ink and static feathered garments. Each watched without blinking. The Council watched their masterpiece, the end of humanity, broadcast live across 29 systems. And yet, the prisoner smiled. Kale stood barefoot at the center of the pit. His wrists were bound with golden neural thread. His robes, standard for high crimes, were dyed with purple sorrow pigment, the hem soaked dark where it kissed the floor. His head was bowed, but not in shame, not in surrender. He looked like a relic the moment before thunder. Counselor Veltrix Sarn exhaled through her throat, harmonic, a high, dry note that translated into the scent of ozone and vinegar. Disgust. Humans are supposed to tremble. An archival drone, IRIX 5, drifted beside her, limbs clattering with outdated code. He has not cried, nor screamed, nor resisted injection of the obedience protocol. Her scent changed. Confusion. Citrus tin. But Kale wasn't listening. He was looking at the noose, as if measuring it. Somewhere, buried in a Terran archive he'd once loved, a child's drawing still lived. She'd called it My Dad in the Moon, though the moon was upside down and his head had no ears. He wondered if it remembered color. The noose twitched. Veltrix's 4 eyes narrowed. He smiled. Kale looked up, slowly. His gaze met hers. His voice, raw, unfiltered, quiet, slid across the amphitheater, like a forgotten key sliding into a long-rusted lock. You've already begun to lose. The words didn't echo. They settled. This was the moment the invocation of inferiority was supposed to begin, a ceremonial chant performed by genetically cloned priest larvae now peeling themselves from the arena walls like wet silk. Their mouths opened too wide, prepared to sing syllables designed to dissolve emotional resistance in mammals. But Kale wasn't listening. He tilted his head, watching the noose again. Not with fear, with timing. The execution glyph at his feet blinked once. Veltrix Sarn hissed a warning scent. Check sequence integrity. IRIX 5 responded. Sequence aligns. Running again. Rechecking. Wait, it disagrees with itself. Kale blinked once, slow. In the quiet between systems, a signal pulsed. Not large, not loud, just elegant. The noose shivered. A flicker, a twitch, a color not part of any known spectrum. Yellow, violet, human red. One priest larva opened its mouth and paused. Its chant snagged mid-syllable. Kale exhaled. He didn't speak. He didn't resist. Because everything that needed to be said had already been written. Word by word, into their rituals. The glyph beneath Kale's feet sparked, then cracked. A single line of code split from center to wall, glowing blue-white. Not light, not flame. Syntax. Alive. Recursive. Terran. Veltrix? Sarn leaned forward too fast. IRIX 5, what is this? IRIX's optics blinked in panic binary. Not council code, not mine, not alien. Kale moved a single step forward. The golden neural thread fell from his wrist like memory slipping from a dream. By law, Veltrix snapped, her voice skipping, you are to remain still during invocation. Kale looked at her with something close to pity. You're still using commands, he said. I already changed your dictionary. Far above, millions watched the feed. They didn't yet know what they were seeing, but they would. And none would forget the moment the noose meant to end, one prisoner began to pull away like it was afraid of its own question. The priest larvae twitched. Their chant, born from centuries of sacred syllables, stuttered like a skipping disc. One opened its mouth again. No sound. Another began humming a half-tone too low, dissonant, wrong. The amphitheater's harmony fractured. And Kale smiled. Not wide, not arrogant, just deliberate. Like someone hearing the music he'd composed played slightly out of tune. Or Counselor Veltrix Sarn's throat harmonic buzzed with static. Her voice scent came out sour. Why is he smiling? Irix 5 hovered closer to Kale. Its optical array flickering. Query. Human emotional cause? Cross-referencing facial curvature with stress pattern database. It paused. No match found. Categorizing as anomaly. Kale was still watching the noose. The loop now pulsed with colors outside standard execution spectrum, tones too fast for most eyes to register. Like a flicker of code scrolling across skin. It shifted side to side, not up or down, pulling lightly against its own anchor. Almost like it was listening. The amphitheater floor dimmed as the sun filter domes overhead recalibrated. The entire city had tuned in not just by choice, but by design. This execution was meant to be witnessed. The message was supposed to be clear. Earth is broken. Its final rebel is being erased. Instead, a question had entered the feed. One the galaxy didn't have language for. The execution glyph cracked again. This time it spoke. Not in sound, but in form. The crack widened with geometric precision, forming a recursive spiral of Terran mathematics. A visual algorithm that shouldn't exist in alien geometry. Counselor Veltrix took one involuntary step back. That isn't possible. Kale tilted his head. It isn't supposed to be. Atop the amphitheater, signal drones began to stutter. Several twitched, then reoriented, rotating to face Kale. None had received new commands. The priest larvae tried to resume the chant. One succeeded for a moment. Its voice began clean but bent mid-word, twisting into something that sounded human. The tone collapsed. Its neural harmonizer flashed red, then white, then black. Static poured from its mouth. It collapsed. Then the others began to fall. In orbit, the ceremonial satellites, used to beam the Council's most sacred rites, twitched in sync. One blinked red, then blue, then green. Then they began rebroadcasting. But not the Council's signal. Kale's face. Irix 5 spun. The ceremony has been compromised. Define compromised, Veltrix snapped. Syntax reversal. Layered remeaning of ritual glyphs. Temporal recursion. It glitched mid-sentence. He is not breaking the system. He is obeying it in a different way. Kale remained still, hands at his sides, as if every moment was unfolding on schedule. A high-pitched hum slipped through the arena floor. The noose pulsed again. This time it bowed, slackening slightly like a nod. Kale looked up. Just once, and the lights dimmed. Irix, Veltrix said, terminate the feed, lock the system. The drone tried. Its limbs moved, but halted midair. A small light blinked red on its side. Request denied. Override. Authority rerouted. To whom? Kale answered. The ceremony. His voice was too calm. Too certain. He took a step forward, and the noose, grown of alien memory and holy muscle, retreated an inch. A second later, the floor beneath him lifted, just slightly, responding to his motion like a platform in a well-rehearsed performance, as if it had been waiting for his cue. You embedded command phrases into the ritual, Veltrix hissed. Kale didn't nod. He didn't need to. Her silence confirmed everything. Across the systems, viewers stared at their screens. The broadcast hadn't cut. It had refined. The camera angles now followed Kale exclusively. The counselors, the priest larvae, the glyphs, reduced to background. Framing. One voice speaking through thousands of networks. Begin sync, Kale said. He didn't raise his voice. The room obeyed anyway. Far above, defense satellites shifted their orientation. Not toward Earth, not toward threats. Toward him. One by one, their mission designations updated. Executable target. Symbolic link, Observer root. Source node, KO Vox. Moveltrix froze. He isn't triggering our systems. Irix finished for her, voice dry as ash. He is our systems. And still, Kel hadn't raised a hand. He hadn't cast a spell, hadn't broken a lock. He'd simply stood still long enough for the galaxy's most sacred machine to remember who it was waiting for. The execution glyph beneath Kale's feet fractured a second time. Not randomly, precisely. Lines split with surgical geometry, no longer a circle, but a blooming spiral of recursive tearing code. Letters from a dead language pulsed faintly in blue-white light. Not alien light. Earth Standard, C. A dialect once used to align battlefield AI, now buried in forgotten poetry databases. And now, etched into the floor of the galaxy's most sacred site, Counselor Veltrix Sarn lunged forward on her pedestal. Shut it down, all of it. Lock every glyph. Irix 5 shook, its arms clicking like a failing metronome. Glyph systems are no longer listening. Then sever the neural thread, pull him out of command proximity. The thread is gone. Veltrix froze. Below her, Kale stood with arms still bound in gold, but the thread had unraveled. Not snapped, not pulled. It had forgotten what it was meant to do. A pulse echoed through the pit. Low, harmonic, familiar. The kind of sound priests made before sacred rites. But this time it didn't come from the larvae. It came from the floor. And the noose responded. It didn't fall. It folded. Collapsed inward in an arc of reverence. Above, the amphitheater screens twitched. The council crest, a sacred symbol carved from ancient phonetic unity, flickered, then inverted. The curve of its outer ring broke into squares. The inner eye blinked. And then it whispered a word. Listener. Veltrix turned slowly. The word hadn't appeared on just one screen. It was everywhere. Projectors, sidewalls, transcription drones, internal comms. All now broadcasting one message, over and over. Listener confirmed. Root sequence, active. Kale didn't look at it. He didn't need to. One priest larva, still twitching, opened its mouth to restart the chant. But the words had changed. It tried to sing inferiority invocation. Instead, it uttered a children's rhyme, a lullaby in Terran cadence. Its neural harmonizer sparked. It screamed, not in song, but in static. Two more followed. One erupted into a babble of human data packets. Another collapsed, sobbing in fragmented Earth English. My hands are too small for the sky. The audience, tens of thousands across the systems, watched as the unmaking ceremony unraveled. Not violently, poetically. Each failed chant, each corrupted glyph was an ode to a design Kale had woven line by line into the very foundation of the ritual. Not code. Meaning? Veltrix screamed. Not a command, a sound. Something primal. She leapt from her spire, landed clumsily near the amphitheater's base, and clawed at a backup override crystal embedded in the altar. The stone blinked red. Override request denied. She pressed harder, trembling. Emergency clearance, counselor class. I reject this sequence. The glyph blinked back. Sequence accepts you anyway. Kale raised his eyes, slow and still. He hadn't moved more than 3 steps since the ritual began, and yet the amphitheater had revolved around him. He's not disabling the system, Irix muttered. He's praying through it. The ceremonial platform beneath Kale began to lift again, higher now, as if elevating a speaker, not an execution. The floor responded with soft tones, chimes once reserved for royal ascension. The council had encoded obedience into their religion. Kale had rewritten the religion. He stepped forward. 1 step, 2. Each one unlocked another glyph embedded in the floor. Veltrix watched in horror as the code rearranged beneath his feet, forming not a death pattern, but a signal sequence. An announcement. Irix, she gasped. What is this? A recognition cascade, the drone answered. The system is choosing him. Above, orbital beacons blinked in unison. Not to transmit, to listen, and they were listening to Kale Vox. Suddenly a tone played. 3 notes. Silence. 3 notes again. The same musical cadence used to begin sacred oaths across the empire. But this one sounded different. It had Terran rhythm. Slow, final. Kale placed his palm against the ceremonial root glyph at the platform's center. It had once been the Council's core symbol of dominion. Now it pulsed blue and spoke back. Confirmed. Welcome, Source. Veltrix fell to her knees. Not in surrender. In disbelief. You infected our language. Kale turned. His voice was soft. No, I just listened long enough to teach it something else. The noose above pulsed one final time, then retreated fully into its mount. Gone. Unneeded. Because the ceremony had already chosen who would be unmade. And it wasn't Kale. The glyph beneath his feet no longer cracked. It sang. A hum, low and solemn, echoed through the stone. Not mechanical, not even musical. Ceremonial. Sacred. A tone only ever used at the coronation of planetary sovereigns or at their funerals. Kale didn't move, but everything else did. The amphitheater dimmed. Spires twisted subtly inward. Glyphs once meant to symbolize judgment now rotated, slowly, reverently, toward Kale, as if the arena itself had changed alignment. Counselor Veltrix Soarn scrambled back, her eyes wide, her limbs unsure. It's not possible. But Irix 5 hovered beside her, twitching. Its voice was calm, empty. Possibility is irrelevant. The glyphs are no longer bound to council law. She turned on it, trembling. Then to what are they bound? To him. A hush fell. But it wasn't silence. It was listening. All around them, the amphitheater walls lit up, glyph by glyph, phrase by phrase. Alien scripture bent into curves of Terran recursion. Languages cracked open, reshaped. Words that never belonged together suddenly made sense. And Kale stood in the center, still, waiting. One of the priest larvae moaned. It wasn't pain. It was recognition. Its song, once sacred, now tried to harmonize with something inside the air. It failed. The syllables broke. The harmonizer in its chest sparked and went dark. Above the arena, the broadcast drones paused midair. One by one, they turned toward Kale. Not scanning, not recording, obeying. Kale looked up just once. No signal sent, no code spoken. And yet, satellites in orbit realigned. Defense relays blinked in cascading unison. They were all syncing to one identity. Not council authorized, not imperial, but something simpler, something older. Source node, Kale Vox. Veltrix gasped. He's not just inside the system, he's anchoring it. A deep, resonant chime rolled across the arena. 3 notes. Silence. Then again. 3 notes. It was the anthem. Their anthem. But something in the rhythm had shifted. It was still ceremonial. Still beautiful. But now, it obeyed the wrong voice. Irix 5 stuttered. Choral protocol. Out of sync. Harmonic layering reversed. Its limbs convulsed. Its speakers clicked once, then began to play Earth's first contact greeting. In reverse. Kale said nothing, but the root glyph at his feet flared. Blue, then gold, then Terran white. Across the systems, 29 sectors, 400 million terminals. Every defense node tuned into the execution feed, new symbols appeared. One word, just one. Receiver active. Veltrix screamed into her throat harmonic. The air reeked of panic and static. End this. Kill the feed. Sever the circuit. Irix did not answer. It couldn't. Its own sensors had turned inward. Not broken. Just waiting for instruction. And the only language they recognized now was his. Kale stepped forward. A single footfall. The glyph under him widened in response, blooming outward like light through glass. Ceremonial pathways lit up. Not hostile, not aggressive, inviting. One by one, every system that once monitored Kale's containment updated its status. Designation, prisoner observer. Authority class, null root. Execution, directive, pending listening. Veltrick's voice cracked. You did this during the surrender? Didn't you? Kale turned his head slightly, his voice barely a whisper. I didn't need to fight. He looked toward the sky, toward the signal drone still hovering. I just needed to be heard. Suddenly, every feed, every broadcast, every relay, every council archive went dark. A second later, they all came back. Same angle, same broadcast. But the lens had changed. Kale was now centered. Every other figure blurred into shadow. Every screen focused on him. As if the system itself had decided who the speaker was, he looked up, spoke 2 words, begin transmission, and the sky responded. From orbit, Earth's first fleet shifted into visibility. No weapons drawn, no engines flaring, just presence. 3 sleek black ships, long as cities, shimmered like obsidian thought, calm, inevitable. The crowd below didn't scream. They couldn't. There was nothing left to say. Veltrix backed against the wall, voice trembling. You didn't hijack our network. Kale looked at her. Not unkindly. No. You invited me into your temple. I just spoke the language of the altar. The ceremonial spires began to lower. The priest larvae went still. The lights dimmed. A new phrase appeared across every surface. Recognition complete. Ritual redefined. Begin reception. Kale closed his eyes, breathed once, then said, let it begin. The arena didn't explode. It bloomed. Stone cracked with grace, not chaos like petals of iron unfolding to light. The execution platform that once held Kale began to rise, guided by invisible geometry. Glyphs around the amphitheater fractured, reformed, and reconnected into unfamiliar symmetry. Alien alphabets blended with Terran recursion. No longer council script, not human either. Something new. Counselor Veltrix Sarn staggered back, shielding her eyes from a pulse of pale light now flowing from the ceremonial spires. This isn't code, she blinked. It's belief. Kale stood at the heart of it all, calm and centered, as if gravity itself had rooted him there. He touched nothing. He changed everything. At the core of the raised platform sat a stone ancient, sacred, untouched since the Empire's founding. The Imperial Root Glyph, a relic etched with the Empire's founding truths, power, unity, dominion. Kale placed his hand on it. The glyph pulsed once, warm and white. Then it spoke. Confirmed, welcome source. Above, the sky sang, not with voice, but pattern. 3 orbital satellites realigned. One blinked, then another, then all of them. The execution feed continued broadcasting, but now the subtitles read differently. Now they listened in Kale's voice. They wrote obedience into your ceremony, he said. I just retuned the melody. In a war bunker deep beneath Europa's ice shell, a Terran scientist whispered into a console, Project Quietfire has bloomed. Across 29 alien sectors, ceremonial scripts used for treaties, oaths, executions began to hum. The same hum. Terran frequency, wrapped in alien song. They'd been singing the virus for years. Each verse had been a seed, each pause a heartbeat. And now, this was the bloom. Veltrix lunged forward. Initiate counterscript. Launch a reversal chant. 2 of the surviving priest larvae stirred, their mouths opened. The chant began. Ancient syllables, sacred syllables. But Kale raised a hand, a single finger. That rhythm, he whispered, belongs to me now. The chant collapsed. The priest larvae screamed as the harmonic code reversed on itself. Neural harmonizers sparked, their voices turned to fire. They fell, their chests leaking static, their minds caught in recursive loops. They weren't dying, they were unwriting. Across the arena walls, projection glyphs melted into symbols no one had ever seen before. Fractals layered inside themselves. Alive, breathing. The code didn't scroll, it spiraled. And the message it wrote? Judgment confirmed. Sovereign recognized. Root authority, Kale Vox. Veltrix dropped to her knees. Her limbs twitched. She reached for the altar again, tried to pull up the emergency override command etched in ceremonial bone. It flickered in and out. "Erix," she gasped, "tell me what's happening." The archivist drone hovered beside her, unmoving. One of its eyes twitched, bleeding Terran characters. Its voice was no longer itself. Language has abandoned the speaker. Kale turned toward the amphitheater crowd. Thousands of beings. None blinking. None moving. Because their translation implants were silent. Or worse, whispering poetry in Earth English. "You believe beauty equaled safety," Kale said. "So you embedded loyalty into your rituals." He stepped to the edge of the platform. "But Earth doesn't write prayers. We write viruses. And you've been praying in my syntax for years." One of the drones overhead blinked gold. A banner of ceremonial light unfurled above the council's spires. It showed the sacred sigil, then twisted it into something else. A recursion glyph, Terran-born. Simple, fatal. Veltrix sobbed into her throat chime. The air filled with the scent of static and grief. "What do you want?" Kale looked down at her, as if the question was foreign. "Want?" He blinked. "This isn't want. This is correction." Across the council's database cores, files flickered. History unspooled. Laws reversed. Archives crumbled into self-canceling metadata. Ceremonial oaths began reciting themselves backward, each closing with the same phrase. This was always a conversation. Kale placed his second hand on the root glyph. The arena dimmed. The satellite feeds aligned. Somewhere far above, a final beacon flared. "Let it echo," Kale whispered. And the glyph replied, "Echo accepted." Protocol, resonance. Veltrix's limbs failed. She collapsed forward, tears flickering down inked skin. "This was supposed to be our altar." Kale turned from her, his voice no longer quiet. Still low, but filled with weight. "It still is. You just never asked what it was built to remember." The sky bloomed again. This time, not in violence. In synchronization. And from orbit, one final directive descended across every screen, every mind, every ritual stone. He is not inside the system. He is the shape the system takes when it no longer fears you. The air around the council's capital shimmered like heat off metal. But there was no heat, no sound, just a ripple through the upper atmosphere, as if the sky was blinking, then bending. From that slow fold came shape, not flame, not light, presence. Black silhouettes stretched across the clouds. Long, smooth vessels with no insignia, no heat signature, no declaration of war. 3 of them at first, then 5, then dozens. Not descending, just arriving. As though they'd always been here, just outside the edge of sight. Inside the arena, a soft tremor rolled beneath the floor. Unmeasured, unscripted, not aggressive, more like a tide brushing against a forgotten dock. Veltrix Sarn looked up. Her mouth formed a word, but no sound followed. "Irix." 5 scanned the sky. Objects detected. Unidentified vector. Mass signatures. Terran. Its voice failed halfway through the reading. Kale hadn't looked up yet. He remained beside the root glyph, one hand resting calmly on its surface. The platform beneath him now floated a few meters above the amphitheater's base, unthreatening, like a preacher's pulpit in a cathedral whose gods had changed mid-sermon. Outside, across the city's high towers, Ceremonial banners failed to deploy. The wind had stopped responding to climate regulation systems. Somewhere in the diplomatic district, a statue wept water from its stone eyes, part of an automatic purification protocol that no one had remembered existed. High above, the Terran fleet aligned without formation. Each ship turned slightly, slowly, then stilled. There were no sirens, no laser arrays charging, no countdowns, just stillness. An entire network of ships and systems watching. Within the amphitheater, council dignitaries stood motionless. Some blinked in confusion. Others clutched ceremonial override crystals that no longer recognized their neural signatures. One delegate, young by council standards, finally whispered what the others had refused to admit. They aren't here to conquer. A second added, just above breath. They're here to erase the part of us that thought they wouldn't return. Kale moved. Not quickly. He simply stepped down from the platform, which lowered itself to meet him. His posture wasn't triumphant. He didn't raise a fist. No grand gesture. No final speech. Just the calm of someone whose part in the story was almost over. From the shadowed gate of the arena, two more figures emerged. Sarah Vale, dressed in dark field robes, moved with the quiet precision of someone used to standing one step outside command. Bran Grim Kellen followed, broader and slower, the metal of his shoulder plates dulled with ash and time. Sarah joined Kale without a word. She looked up once at the Terran fleet. They synced before we arrived. Kale nodded faintly. Good. Bran's voice was rough but calm. Any resistance? Sarah shook her head. Nothing coordinated. Their systems still believe they're speaking ritual code, not war. The ships above rotated slightly again. Barely a degree. It was enough. Across the city, energy grids began cycling themselves into shutdown states. Terran dropships detached from the larger cruisers. Not sleek fighters, but quiet cylinders descending like surgical tools. They didn't fire. They landed on key network nodes, memory banks, satellite link towers, cultural preservation halls. And once grounded, they began to speak. Not in language, not even in sound, but in frequency, a harmonic loop that matched the council's own sacred tones. Except shifted by just enough to make meaning collapse. One by one, local systems failed to parse the tone. The religious archives began answering simple queries with riddles. Security walls scanned themselves. Translation implants defaulted to Earth Standard C, and then began to rewrite. Veltrix Saarn stood among the static fog as if waiting for a command that would never come. We built our empire on belief, she whispered. Irix 5 hovered behind her, processing fractured data. Its last complete statement came in Kale's voice. Your belief is still running. It's just been redirected. A crowd outside the arena gathered near one of the drop pods. It didn't open. Instead, it projected the Empire's anthem, slowly, reverently, then inverted it chord by chord. The crowd didn't resist. They listened. And then forgot why they were there. Bran stood near the outer gate, cracking the casing on a protein bar. Doesn't feel like victory, Kale answered without looking at him. It isn't. Sarah turned to the arena, watching the sacred sigils melt into Terran recursion lines. Then what is it? Kale's voice held no celebration. Maintenance. Atop the highest tower, a signal light blinked green, then blue, then gold. Earth's diplomatic sequence, buried long ago in peaceful treaties, broadcast in pure, clean rhythm. 3 pulses. Pause. 3 more. And with it, a single phrase hovered above the city in every known dialect. You crowned the wrong corpse. In orbit, the Terran ships pulsed once more, then stilled again. None had deployed weapons. None needed to. Because the Council had done it for them when they tied obedience to ritual and broadcast it as law. Kale had simply written the final verse. Veltrix staggered to the center of the arena, her hands bloodied from failing command glyphs. This isn't how you fight. Kale turned to her fully now. I didn't come to fight. Then what? I came to remind you that forgetting isn't always accidental. She tried to scream. The sound failed. The system translated it for her anyway. Permission to proceed. Kale Vox. Kale looked skyward, his expression unreadable, then down to the glyph under his palm. Do it. A final pulse rolled across the planet. Soft. Clean. As if the system took a breath. And in the distance, one of the last defense towers blinked twice. Its screen cleared and printed only 3 words. Ritual complete. Reset accepted. Above the clouds, the Terran fleet began to drift. Not outward, but inward. Fold by fold, the sky closed behind them. No banners, no signatures, just silence. Kale turned his back on the council chamber. Brand followed, dragging his hammer-shaped drone behind him like a tired soldier. Syrah stayed a moment longer, eyes on the arena. They'll never know what they lost. Kale's reply was almost a whisper. That's the mercy. As they disappeared through the gate, the last drone hovering over the council box translated a phrase that hadn't been spoken aloud. He didn't disable the Empire. He erased the script it believed in. The council archive began erasing itself. Not in destruction, in confusion. Lines of encoded history flickered on the ceremonial vault walls, then blurred, like ink soaked into water. Images of past conquests dissolved mid-frame. Transcripts looped, reversed, then stopped entirely. Names broke apart. Treaties folded into themselves. War declarations collapsed into poetry. Veltrix Sarn stood alone at the center of the chamber. Her limbs shook, not from pain, but from something deeper. A silence she had never known. It wasn't just that the system no longer obeyed her. It was that she no longer recognized what it meant to be obeyed. The platform where Kale had stood was now empty. The root glyph dimmed, its surface smoothed over like memory retreating behind old stone. He hadn't destroyed anything. He had simply turned off the parts of the world that relied on being believed in. Irix 5 hovered in the upper dome, voice stammering across corrupted channels. Empire logic loop corrupted, loyalty rituals unaligned, defensive oaths destabilized. Its optics dimmed one by one. This unit has no function. Veltrix knelt before the primary altar. The override crystal sat in her hand, once a symbol of total command. Now it was just a stone. The glyphs along its edge no longer shimmered. They had stopped responding hours ago. She whispered to it anyway. We built our order on songs. She pressed the crystal to her chest. Why won't they sing anymore? The room offered no answer. Just quiet. Across the capital, ceremonial towers stood intact, but hollow. Public squares streamed no warnings. Holographic messengers floated in still poses, lips unmoving. Children's education archives returned only blank interfaces. Even the sky, once colored by living pigment, had gone flat. And no one could remember how it used to sound when morning came. In one district, a ritual master began his prayer to the stars. Halfway through the second verse, he paused. The words felt unfamiliar. He finished with a whisper. I don't know what I'm asking for. Elsewhere, a council captain attempted to initiate a last call defense lockdown. The command console accepted her credentials, then displayed one sentence. You are still authorized. But for what, we no longer understand. Veltrix stared at the empty amphitheater. The glyphs were no longer glowing. The priest larvae had been removed. The audience never returned. Even the air seemed thinner, like belief had weight, and now it had been lifted. Kale had said it wasn't war. He hadn't lied. She stood, walked to the outer balcony where she had once watched executions unfold with sacred pride. The Terran fleet was gone now, in no trace, not even vapor trails, only the echo of something larger than punishment. You didn't break us, she said softly to no one. You reminded us. We had nothing to stand on. Her fingers traced the balcony rail, once etched with the council's creed. Now, smooth, worn down by something deeper than time. Behind her, the lights dimmed, not because anyone turned them off, but because they were no longer necessary. The council's anthem never played again. Its final chords remained half-written, interrupted during the execution that became a resurrection. No one rewrote it. No one tried. Because now, across the sectors once bound by law and glyph, there was a new ritual. Silence. Kale stepped from the final corridor into the lower deck of a ship, not marked by flags or language. No escort, no broadcast, no speech. Bran and Sarah were already aboard. They didn't look back. They didn't need to. Earth had nothing left to prove. Only memory to collect. The ship's doors closed with no hiss. Just compression. Clean, unemotional. Outside, the council's capital was still intact. The towers stood, the streets curved, the machines hummed. But no one was waiting for instructions. Not because they'd rebelled, because the code that gave orders had forgotten why it ever wanted to. As Kale passed through the navigation corridor, he paused once. A small panel on the wall flickered. It showed the system's central time index, usually a steady rhythm of cycles. Now it pulsed once, paused, then blinked out. Yeah, no countdown. Just the absence of need. In a distant sector, a child opened a sacred storybook passed down through generations. Inside, the text had gone blank. The pictures had faded. Only the title remained, etched faintly across the top. What they feared, they tried to erase. A diplomat from a neutral world would later say, it wasn't war. It was a mirror. When the Terran ship entered fold space, no beacon was sent ahead. No declaration to nearby systems. It slipped between stars like a breath returning to lungs that hadn't drawn air in centuries. Kale stood in the observation chamber, watching the void bend around them. Sarah stepped beside him, quiet. They'll never rebuild it. Kale didn't reply, not out of coldness, but because rebuilding had never been the point. Bran sat near the back of the chamber, his boots off, head tilted back. I still don't get it, he muttered. You didn't kill a single one of them. Kale turned his head, just slightly, his eyes calm. They tried to execute a man. He looked forward again, not knowing he'd already rewritten the execution. Behind them, stars folded in silence. Ahead, no path was drawn. Only space. I know.